Welcome to the Township of Whitewater Region's regular council meeting for Wednesday, October 4th. We're going to call to order at 1:01 p.m. First, we'll start off with a Canadian anthem. If I can get everybody rise, please, and face the flag. Please grab a seat, and I'll proceed with our land acknowledgement. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Next item is the adoption of the agenda. 3.1, the recommendation is that the Council of Township Whitewater Region approve the agenda as presented. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Moore and the Deputy Mayor. Is there any omissions or errors that have been noted in the agenda? None. Call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried. Item number 4 is the adoption of the minutes. 4.1, the recommendation that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region approve the regular minutes of June 21st and September 20th, 2023. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Trim, Councillor Bell. Is there any errors or omissions on that minutes that you've seen? Either set. Seeing none, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? It's carried. And I'll just highlight there, you'll see at 4.1A on the agenda, we have the Muskrat Watershed minutes. There's no need for us to accept them. They're there for yours and the public's information. And I don't believe there's any notes that we have to speak to on those minutes at this time. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, disclosures of interest. Is there any disclosures? Yes, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be disclosing on item number 9.1 and 9.2, and the reason being I have an immediate family member who owns a short-term rental accommodation. Thank you.
Perfect. Noted by the clerk. Good. And the paperwork is here. So at that time, we'll just make sure that from the clerk's perspective, the Deputy Mayor leaves the room. Thank you. Any other disclosures on today's agenda? Seeing none. Next item, presentations, and I'll just get the clerk to confirm there's no presentations today. None. Good. Next is the Mayor's address. So I've prepared a short address. Welcome into October, and it's great to have October come around again. It seems like it's so quick. The last 2 weeks have been a beautiful fall, and hard to believe that we've got cold weather sometime in our near future. So we'll see. So welcome to October. I participated in 12 events over the past two weeks on behalf of Council, one of which that I like to highlight was the Upper Ottawa Valley Chamber of Commerce Gala, where they recognized the achievement of businesses across the Ottawa Valley over the past year. I was in attendance with 2 of our own business owners here in Whitewater Region. It was a great evening, great event. And in fact, a business here in Whitewater region was recognized for excellence in agribusiness category. Winterfell Stables, which is just up Highway 17 by Muskrat Lake, were recognized. Congratulations to Hillary Moss and her team at Winterfell Stables. So I haven't found the photo online, but I know the staff are also going to advertise that on Facebook as soon as we can get it, the photos released. Next, some updates on ongoing projects for here in Whitewater region. First is our ice operations, just to continue to make sure people are up to date with what's going on. Things are continuing to progress steadily. Operations are ongoing well here in Cobden at the arena. The agreement between the BRA, Beachburg Recreation Association, has been signed, and they are going to be starting to make ice this week. The hiring process for the additional staff needed to operate the Westmeath Arena is ongoing, and we're looking forward to having it open, fingers crossed, by the end of the month. And we can expect a more fulsome report from staff later on in the fall, especially with respect to financial impacts, both on any revenues lost and any increased expenses. Second update is the culvert that we spoke about in early July on Moxham, I want to say Road, is that right? Road, Moxham Road. Our Public Works team has replaced it. And if you get a chance to get down there and see the work, I've been told it looks great and the road has been cleaned up, and hopefully it's going to last another lifetime. Good. Third update is just a short note about the Pembroke Pool. Pembroke Pool is a resource for many of our families that access it without having to pay non-resident fees. They've had, the pool has unfortunately had an equipment breakdown, and it will be closed until further notice. And I also just want to share that Pembroke Council is also looking at options to replace that pool, and have initiated discussions with the neighboring municipalities on some of the options they are considering. We're in that discussion. Similar to our situation with our 3 arenas, infrastructure is very expensive, and so much of it is now nearer at the point of failure. So it's going to be a discussion, I expect, just like our rinks with the pool. An update from the County Council's meeting last week, and I believe the summary will probably not make it into the agenda until the next council meeting, but the summary is available at the next council meeting. But just a quick update. We received a briefing from the Pembroke Area Airport Commission, a great presentation that we're hoping to also have them deliver to you as councils, as Township of Whitewater Region Council. Staff is working out the arrangements. It's important that we appreciate the impact of the airport has on our economic development as well as the services in our community. So more information for us to follow on that. Another interesting item that was talked about at county was a decision to direct staff to work with the town of Renfrew to develop a concept for modular seniors village at the Bonnechere Manor. So a very interesting proposal if you want to look into that. And I'm very interested to see how this concept might work to help address affordable housing shortages here in our area. And then last, just on to tonight's agenda, it really sets the stage, this agenda, for our work this fall. First, you're going to see a request for us to receive a draft bylaw that could govern short-term rental accommodations in our communities. This would initiate a public consultation process to provide council feedback. Second, we will have an update from on our comprehensive zoning bylaw project. So it provides us some updates on that and our plan going forward. And finally, the budget direction to staff. This is an opportunity for you as council to provide staff with high-level direction as they prepare the budget for our review later this month. It's also especially important given all of our increased demands for services, for the repairs of our buildings, for roads and stormwater systems. These are all in direct competition with keeping the cost to our taxpayer as low as possible. So we have to keep it affordable without pushing the expenses into the future generation, forcing them to try to figure out the problem. So, although there's only 3 or 4 items on the main agenda tonight, they're very big items. So it'll be interesting, looking forward to that discussion. Anyway, that ends my address. Thank you. Next, we have some public comments. So I'd like to welcome, we have 3 speakers. They're going to, we first have John Meadows, and then Phil Cottrell and Steve Bennett. They're all going to be addressing the council on short-term accommodation. And just a review for members of council and anybody viewing, in the public's comments section of our agenda, the public has an opportunity, a 3-minute opportunity, to provide feedback directly to council on anything on our agenda for this day. So with that, I'd like to invite Mr. John Meadows up to the mic. And Mr. Meadows, when you're ready, just get your green light on your mic.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Perfect. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank council for this opportunity to come before you. I also want to publicly thank Ivan, Alex, and Carmen for all your help, understanding policies and procedures and helping us know what's up.
So, Mr. Meadows, just before you continue, can I get you to bring that mic closer to your mouth? Yeah, it
Okay.
bends, yeah.
Okay, that's a little better.
That
yeah.
works?
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear the echo.
Perfect, thank you.
My wife Rose and I are victims of commercialization of our residential area with the existence of STRs. I could talk 3 hours rather than 3 minutes, but my voice wouldn't hold out. There are many issues to be addressed. I'll briefly touch just a few. A very major concern is beach fires. I can even hear concerns from folks who are not waterfront owners being affected by the smoke. In an incident fairly recently, a resident on Rapid Road had the smoke detector go off at night from the smoke of a beach fire, which was a real distance away. To the dismay of residents, renters often entertain themselves with fireworks. One incident this year, I thought a shotgun was being discharged, was relieved to see not a firearm, but fireworks. No noise bylaw, no fireworks bylaw. Can't do a thing. Beach fires are not just in the evening, as they're often started in the middle of the day. Renters have no regard to wind direction. Another couple from Rapid Road, Ray and Melissa Cousineau, name used with permission, also complain about the beach fires and have to close the windows in the middle of the day. My wife is a victim of this too. She has a lung condition, often goes inside. In order to increase revenue, some residences have been extensively renovated to increase the bedroom count. To my knowledge, the septic systems have not. To complicate this issue, most renters have guests, which can boost the number of people over 15. Recently, I was forced into purchasing and installing no parking signs, as renters seem to think that if a space is big enough for their vehicle, they can use it regardless of ownership. Also, much to my dismay, had to put up no trespassing signs in an attempt to curtail indiscriminate wanderings onto our property. If we move forward with this whole issue, we certainly hope that registrations and fines for non-compliance and infractions will pay for administration, inspection, and enforcement, and the costs not to be thrust upon ratepayers. The STRs in our neighborhood have absentee landlords, therefore no on-site monitoring, turning them into actual party palaces. We certainly do not see these businesses being an economic boon to our region. Renters seem to bring all they need for their short stay. An owner actually complained to us about prices at Kenny's store and has passed this on to renters. We certainly hope council will consider regulating this industry in an expeditious, transparent, unbiased manner. To leave it as is a deprivation of the quality of life. Neighborhoods are for neighbors, not short-term rentals. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Meadows. And I'll just remind council and anybody watching that during the public comment section, there is no questions from council. It's only to receive the feedback. So item 8.2, Mr. Cottrell, you're up.
Can everybody hear me okay? Very good. I just want to reiterate what John said about the help that we get when we call in. When we call in, somebody actually picks up the phone, which is a rare occurrence these days. So it's a delight to deal with some of you both on staff and on council. All right, enough platitudes. It's eating into my 3 minutes. So I want to address two issues. First of all, complaints. This is what we get. But we've had no complaints. We've had no complaints. It's our belief that the complaint process is extremely weak here and ineffective. It's driven by the individual, and in many cases, people are simply reluctant to complain. It's often an issue with neighbors where they don't want to jeopardize their relationship with neighbors by complaining about them. So in most cases, people simply suffer in silence. Venting is one thing. Making an official complaint is one step further that many people don't want to go to. And then we have the whole issue of enforcement. In the absence of a bylaw officer, people lose faith in the fact that their complaint may not be acted upon. So bottom line, there may be no official complaints, but that does not mean there is no shortage of complaining. Second point I'd like to address is noise. One of the most common complaints regarding STAs, STRs, and there are many complaints, and they're many well documented, lots of references, but the main one, or one of the main ones, is that of noise. Unwanted noise, loud, inconsiderate noise, which can be in the form of music, as it often is, or loud partying with shouting and foul language, which is not uncommon, and not uncommon here in the Whitewater region. It does seem inconceivable that a civilized municipality such as ours does not have a noise bylaw, some form of noise bylaw. It's essential that a bylaw regarding noise should be in place to protect those folk who are burdened and inconvenienced by unnecessary noise from folk who in many cases have no respect for others, the thoughtless few. So we urge Council to do the right thing and enact some form of noise bylaw sooner rather than later. Renfrew has a noise bylaw, 14-2005, which protects residents from unnecessary and unwanted noise, quote, noise created from a radio, television, or any musical or sound production instrument when such a device is played or operated in such a manner or with such a volume as to disturb the inhabitants of a dwelling, and the noise made by domestic animals, including a persistent barking dog, end of quote. Horton Township, with half the population we have, less than half the population, has a noise bylaw. One of the arguments we hear against having a noise bylaw here is that we live in a farming community where farmers may need to operate equipment sometimes into the night in terms of harvesting, etc. Simple answer, exempt the farmers from a noise bylaw. So what do you call when there's a loud drunken party? Who do you call when there's a loud drunken party going into the night, causing endless grief for those living nearby? Why can't we have a noise bylaw? How sad is that? If Little Horton can have a noise bylaw, it can't be a big task for us to construct one, surely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. And final presentation, Mr. Stephen Bennett.
Hello, Council, Your Worship, Council members, staff. My name is Stephen Bennett. I am not the mayor of Laurentian Valley. You can just think of me as a good-looking Steve Bennett. I'm here because my piece of paradise has been compromised. Let me tell you a little bit. 2 years ago, I bought a piece of property on Rapid Road. I call it 1 acre and a mule. This was our dream when we retired, to move up to the Ottawa Valley, buy a piece of property on the river, and live out our lives. 2 years ago, I bought that piece of property. Unfortunately, my wife passed away 9 years ago. She battled cancer 3 times in 10 years. I'm living the dream for both of us. Everything seemed right with the world. I loved it. It's a fairly heavily treed property. It's a hill with a shack on it. I love it. It's tiny. I love it. I have 4 sons, 2 granddaughters, and 1 grandson. They visit quite often, and along with cousins. I have a 200-year history, almost 200-year history in this area with my family. So the roots go fairly deep. Something happened a year ago, and I'll call it an existential crisis, which you hear on the news all the time. Well, I'm going through an existential crisis right now, and it's due to the fact that my neighbors to the south of me, who were great people, sold their property. They sold it to a couple who opened up an Airbnb. I did not buy my property to be living beside a resort. The existential crisis I'm talking about is, let's describe it as a sense of unease. So instead of having peace of mind, which I think we all desire and we work towards when we retire, we like that peace of mind finally. And that peace of mind for me is really wavering because of this Airbnb. It's sort of that sense of the unknown, you know? It's a fear, maybe, something I got to overcome, but I have strangers living beside me all the time. Strangers. I don't know them from that, you know, whatever, I won't say that word. It's a psychological and a physical barrier to my neighbors. We have a really close-knit neighborhood. Most of us are retired. My neighbors, I can't believe how much they've done for me and how good they are. It's what a sense of community we have up here. You put an STR in the middle of that, and now you've separated. You put a wall up. You don't want to invade their privacy, people you don't know, and walk on what they're renting, that part of the beach, to get to my, say, John or Phil's place, because you don't want to, I don't want to invade their privacy. Not only that, if I start walking on their part of the beach, for sure they're going to start walking on my part. Do I have 1 minute or is that it? Thank you for listening. It's really put a wedge in my lifestyle. Do the right thing. Do the right thing. I say ban STRs in neighborhoods where the residents are full-time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Good. Thank you, 3 members of the public, providing their input into today's agenda items.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Thanks, yes.
And I'll just check with the clerk. Did we receive any other comments in writing?
We did receive one from, I'm sorry, Catherine Trim. Tim, sorry, yes, it is. Thanks for that correction. I didn't get it in time to put it on the agenda, so all of council was circulated with it, so they all should have one in front of them.
Perfect. Thank you. Good. Well, and that concludes our public comment short portion of the agenda, and that just makes sure that council has this information directly from the public on some of our agenda items. Excellent. We'll move on to item number 9. Before we commence, we'll get the Deputy Mayor to step out. Perfect. Item 9.1. The recommendation before us is that the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region take from the table the motion on short-term accommodations bylaw. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Trim, seconded by Councillor Bell. Is there any discussion on removing this from the table?
There is no discussion on a...
Perfect. Then we'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Carried. Good. We'll go on to 9.2. Short-term accommodations. The recommendation is the Council of the Township of Whitewater Region receive the draft short-term accommodation bylaw for information purposes, and 1, direct staff to consult with the public and stakeholders in accordance with the public consultation and community engagement policy, including hosting an open house and survey, and 2, direct staff to report back to council with the findings and any recommended changes for their consideration. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Trim, seconded by Councillor Tabbert. And we'll start with discussion, or sorry, presentation of the report.
Yeah.
Going back to the clerk.
Yes, please. All right. I tried to sum it up as best I can in a few pages, so I'll try to read quickly so we can not take it too long. So this item was originally scheduled for the April 19th meeting, and it was tabled for today, so that's why it's being brought up today. Just a little bit about STAs is they are defined as private residential dwelling units that are rented to provide temporary accommodation, usually for less than 30 days, to a person or persons who do not reside in the dwelling. There generally is 3 forms of STAs. The first one is where the resident rents the entire dwelling while they're away from their property. So that could be like the people go to Florida, they live here all summer long, and then maybe they rent it out in the winter. Another type is where an entire dwelling that is rented, that is purchased for the sole purpose of renting it out. And then the last version is if there's an accessory unit on the site, so a granny suite or whatnot that gets rented out. And also due to online rental platforms like Airbnb or Booking.com or Expedia or whatever it's called, availability at STAs have increased and made them a very popular choice. So staff has reached out to different municipalities in Ontario, and they found that a number of municipalities have indeed enacted a short-term accommodation bylaw. And the reason they specified were for safety and services, so economic capture. It helps municipalities govern or license or, and provide public safety and quality controls to the units. It also helps with site plan control, capacity demands, and in exploring options for regulating STAs, public and community engagement was definitely a big thing with these other municipalities. And the pros to short-term accommodations are related to economic activity. They can bring people into the municipality, which also could lead to them spending money in the municipality. It also allows the homeowners the flexibility to supplement their income if they're away from their property for periods of time. And some negatives are the impacts to nearby residents. Short-term rentals have the potential to be noisy during daytime hours. Waste collection, other municipal bylaws can also be problematic. Occupancy-related issues as number of guests and impacts on septic water systems, lake health are also a concern. They also choose to regulate because of enforcement and liability. One thing that the municipality should look for is the potential of liability. As soon as the municipality does do one kind of inspection, they can be liable for any potential cost that there may be, whether it goes to court or if somebody trips, whatever. There's also significant cost pressures on municipality resources to license. The township generally is a reactive-based enforcement where the case is initiated upon receiving a complaint. Accordingly, the following is a brief overview of the complaint process. So once we receive a complaint, details from the complainant are recorded using various investigation techniques and methods. Bylaw enforcement staff attempt to confirm the contravention, and this may require multiple visits to the property and inspections. Upon the complaint being substantiated, the property owner is provided with a written notice or a violation. If the compliance isn't obtained, the owner must cease to operate, and then bylaw may lay fines if the compliance is not made. And if it is achieved, they do a follow-up just to ensure that they are still being enforced correctly. So but we don't have enforcement on weekends and nights. And because of that, community expectations with respect to STAs and resolving neighborhood issues may not be met. So definitely enforcement options should be a discussion. Also, licensing fees. Fees need to be set at a level that can also recover all the costs so that the users or the ratepayers of our township aren't paying for them. License fees should be reasonable so that owners are willing to step up and actually pay them. As the municipalities that we received some feedback from, the fees vary from $200 to $3,000. Like, they're all over the place. So setting these amounts will be challenging. Some municipalities also chose to create a class-based system for different amounts for off-site units. So if you don't live on site, you would pay more of a license fee than somebody who's actually on site or has like a maintenance person on site that can watch the property. And some municipalities who choose to regulate also have reached out to an online software to help regulate them. Working with the Township of Greater Madawaska, Laurentian Valley, and the Town of Arnprior, who do not regulate short-term accommodations right now. They're considering it. We met with STA compliance models. Their organizations named Granicus and Avenue. Both sell software that help license and monitor short-term accommodations. Both organizations monitor over 60-plus short-term accommodation sites. And they have the ability to determine by the ad whether or not it's a duplicate ad or not. They offer 24/7 web monitoring and hotline to report short-term rental complaints, so bylaw for parking, noise, illegal rentals. And they offer an online application for streamlining registration and licensing permitting of the applications. Both organizations have noted that our peak season we had over 60 short-term rentals. So I guess just to narrow it down, research, public consultation, and a detailed report should be completed in order to address the concerns of regulating, enforcing, and staffing so that council could make an informed decision. Staff feel that a public consultation and a fulsome report of the requirements should be completed to ensure success of our draft bylaw. If we have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Clerk. Appreciate that. Good. I will turn over to my mover, Councillor Trim. Comments or questions from you first?
Not a question so much as a comment. I'm thinking that now, if we vote to direct staff to pursue developing a bylaw for council's consideration, I'm expecting that that won't happen, and I'm happy with this. It won't happen until sometime in the new year, probably closer to spring. Am I right in thinking that?
Comment, Clerk?
So I am going to be away for a little while, so correct, I will not be starting this anytime till the new year, but I would like to have something in place regardless. Like, I'd like to have something maybe late winter, very, very early spring, like, because if we're going to implement it, I want it ready to go for this season.
I think it's safe to say, Councillor Trim, that yes, nothing would be in effect until the springtime.
And for me, that sounds reasonable. We should be doing this properly and not rushing it, and giving the public time also for their input. And so I assume that, and I'm thankful that I'm correct.
Thank you. Seconder was Councillor Tabbert. The floor is yours.
I think we need to have this report. I'm not opposed to the STAs or the STRs, or I'm not opposed to having a policy. My concern is all the regulations that we have to put in place and that we have to enforce it. As a poor example, I'm going to say, look at our dog bylaw, our dog kennel bylaw, how much that has caused us. And that's because our bylaw officer only works so many hours. How can we expect him to work this many hours on something like this? Once we put this in place, he's going to have to, work on weekends, work at night. And if we don't enforce it, or if we do enforce it, how about the people who already have one? You think they're going to be legal? Look at the dog kennels again. We have illegal dog kennels that we can't handle right now. So it'll be the same thing, I think. I think we need to hear from the public, more than just 3 people from the public who are opposed to this. It's so complicated. I'm sorry to say, for me, I look at this and I'm just all over the place. We need to have a proper report brought back.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there other comments? Councillor Moore or Councillor Bell? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I kind of just on the same lines as what Councillor Talbot has to say. I'd like to hear, just through that community engagement, if we are going to go through the process of having a town hall and maybe a survey out to the residents, because obviously if we have 6 that are already registering on those sites, it'd be interesting to hear the perspective from that, as well as, like Councillor Talbot was saying, I just a little bit hesitant to take on from the township's perspective, more liability with trying to regulate the STAs when maybe there's other means that we can take on in the form of bylaws or, maybe a better complaint process to try to mitigate some of the negative issues that some of the residents close to these STAs are having. And just, this is a big infrastructure around trying to kind of legislate this type of thing within the municipality. So I'd like to see a more thorough review that's what we're bringing forward, right? So definitely a more thorough review, as well as more community perspective on kind of the pros and cons of what this kind of means to the township.
Thanks, Councillor Bell. Councillor Moore.
Just an observation on page 6. Staff, along with the Township of Greater Madawaska, Laurentian Valley, and Town of Arnprior. I know some of them aren't part of the LEG program, but especially the Greater Madawaska and Laurentian Valley reflects back to, be interesting to know how they would plan to utilize their bylaw, and maybe we could all sort of go together or something. Maybe that's something we could investigate, and it might help cut some of the costs too.
So we sat together and we actually put together the draft that's attached to this report. We all worked together. Now, since we drafted this bylaw, I know other communities have kind of made small changes to make it more their own, but the draft that's attached was one that I believe that we all put together as a group and then just broke away from it. So it should stay very consistent.
Okay, and the second one just came to mind then. If this becomes a bylaw, and if bylaw enforcement's not available, could the OPP be called in?
Can you comment to that at all?
I think the bylaw does touch on the fact that officers can be called on it, but once it's enforceable bylaw, I believe all our bylaws can be enforced by the police officers, can they not? Don't quote me on that. CAO might know that better.
Nice to know that before we are said and done.
So let's just try to close that one item off. CAO, can you offer any
Yeah,
insight?
just to close that item, I have no certainty that the OPP can enforce our bylaws. My experience has been that if a bylaw exists, typically they're more prepared to react on scene if there's an issue. If a bylaw exists that prohibits some type of use. I would only touch on the point that Councillor Bell made is, so two things. One is, as part of this public engagement, we'll engage with our contractor to see if they have the capacity to meet the needs of our township with respect to a bylaw of this nature. So we'll engage with them for that. The second item was with respect to just general complaints and the process by which we manage those. There was a notice of motion by Councillor Olmsted, I think in the spring with respect to that. So we do plan on returning to council with a summary report responding to that notice of motion this fall. So we get a sense of the process that's taken to manage complaints. So those two items just want to add to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, CAO. Is there anything else, Councillor Moore? Good. We'll go around second round. So I saw Councillor Talbot first. Go ahead.
I was under the impression that the police do not respond to our bylaws, because if they do respond to our bylaws after hours, why are they not responding to our dog kennel bylaws? It has nothing to do with this, but I don't see the difference between this and our dog kennel bylaws.
Meaning a bylaw is a bylaw.
Yeah, it shouldn't matter what the bylaw is.
Maybe if I could,
Yes,
just,
please.
there's some uncertainty there. I recognize there's uncertainty to that question, and our clerk will work through that as part of her review of the bylaw. Thanks.
Hoisted aboard. Councillor Trim.
Yes, and this isn't, I recognize this is going to be very difficult for me as a councillor to decide on this, because are we fixing a problem that isn't broken? You know, we aren't receiving a lot of complaints. And I understand that maybe people are hesitant to complain, but how would that change if we have a bylaw? They may still be hesitant to complain. On the other hand, I don't want a tragedy to happen and that we haven't done anything about it. There's well-documented cases where people have been injured, and just recently a number have died in Montreal. And so do we wait for a problem to do something about it, or do we do something because we know out there there are problems and other municipalities have had to tackle them? And so these are things that are really concerning to me, and I realize that it's going to be difficult to do it, but I'm at the moment, you know, based on the bylaw, I'm think that probably it's wiser to be proactive. And so those are my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Trim. Does that trigger any other comments? Councillor Tabbert.
I don't know who can answer this through you, Mr. Mayor. Our bylaws, while you have to make a complaint with your name, when the officer goes out to the property, names are not used. Am I correct in that? So you can make all the complaints you want with your name, and nobody should find out who laid the complaint.
Okay. Can we answer that right now?
Yes. Complaints are confidential, period.
CAO?
If you'll allow me just to add a point. So we just generally do not accept anonymous complaints. There has to be some type of a person or a group, if you will, attached to who raises a concern to our bylaw enforcement officers. So just as a quick note, but yes, everything remains confidential. Thanks.
Thank you.
Keeping with
Councillor
that,
Moore.
how does or does not freedom of information come into play?
So the reason why complaints are confidential is because if it goes to court, that's, and then if, I don't know how to explain it very well, but they need to be kept confidential, because if it goes to court, it can't be an open case. If it's a freedom of information request, you need to put a request in writing to the clerk, and the clerk determines whether or not that information is allowed. If it's available or not. If the information, some of the information is available, some information gets blacked out. Like there is information in a confidential complaint that you cannot receive regardless. So you may not be able to receive.
So I'm going to just, and I understand we may not be able to address this issue right here, but can we just add it to that notice of motion reply that comes later in the fall? Speak specifically or add to the list OPP, enforcement of bylaws, confidentiality, and freedom of information, please. And that'll address it as a separate item. But thank you for the questions. But is there anything else related to this agenda point? Good. So I'm just going to articulate back what I've heard from you folks to see if it changes how the staff approach the problem we see before us before we vote. So on one side, we have residents that are being impacted, and we heard quite clearly 3 instances tonight or this afternoon, and 1 in writing. On one side, we have residences being impacted. The second side, and a potential, the liability. Once we open the can of worms, there's a liability. There's the cost of enforcement, the cost of actually issuing the license and maintaining that information, and then the rise in the expectations. just like the example that was used here with the dog kennel bylaw, is that people will expect that we will be enforcing the bylaw. How do we enforce it? How much does it cost? So these are considerations that we need to weigh with more information, just like each one of you have asked so far. And as Councillor Bell also articulated, there may be other ways for us to be able to address the concerns of the citizens, maybe through a different avenue or different lever that we can pull. So those things also have to be considered. Good. Does that trigger any more comments from members of council? None? Good. Well, then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And it's carried. Thank you. Can you ask the Deputy Mayor? In fact, what we'll do is just in the interest of our members in the gallery, if you would like to leave now, we'll take a short break, and that'll give you an opportunity to leave without disruption. So we'll take a 5-minute break till a recess until 1:51. Welcome back to Township Whitewater Region's regular council meeting for Wednesday, October 4th. It's 1:52 and we'll call ourselves back into order. Just finished 9.2 on the agenda, so we'll move on to 9.3, which is comprehensive zoning bylaw update. And the recommendation before us is that the council receive this report as an update on the comprehensive zoning bylaw project. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Trim, seconded by Councillor Bell. Perfect. And Planner Benzie, going to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Nicholson. So the purpose of this report is to provide council with an update on our comprehensive zoning bylaw review project, particularly how we've implemented the feedback that we've received thus far and talk a little bit about next steps. And I'll just note that this second public meeting will be on the 18th, so the next council meeting. But we wanted to do this first just to give council and the public who are following along with us today just some time to digest this before that meeting. So the majority of the comments that we've received thus far, I'd say about 50%, have been site-specific questions. So a comment from a resident that may have noticed that a zoning bylaw that was passed a couple years ago on their property, it wasn't in the updated map. And in some cases, what was noted on the schedule didn't quite match the exception, and that was because of the huge undertaking it was to take all the exceptions in Ross, take all the exceptions in Westmeath, and then combine them into one. So staff and the consultants, we've been working really hard. We've done a fulsome review again just to kind of fix a lot of those, what I'd call kind of clerical errors, to make sure to remove those discrepancies. And so the updated schedules, I didn't attach them here, but they are online on our projects. We received a bit of feedback on the provisions themselves, but certainly less than the overall site-specific mapping questions. And the key things that we've updated, I've summarized here as the kind of in 5 sort of groups. So the first is around the floodplain provisions. And though we didn't really receive too many comments on this, this was something that we discussed with further consultation with our consultants as well as staff. It's just making sure that they're very clear. So some of the language in the old bylaws, we've just tried to update it so it's a little bit more readable. Zoning can be sometimes difficult even for planners to interpret, so the floodplain provisions were one that we tried to just reorganize a little bit so that it's easier for everybody to understand. And we've also included a nice little picture that describes what a floodplain is and the difference between a flood fringe and the floodway, just to help clarify that as well. The next 2 things are related to preliminary comments that we received from, I would say informal comments that we received from the County of Renfrew staff. The first also, oh, sorry, I just went ahead of myself. That was 3 and 4. For number 2 is actually responding to a question and I believe comment from Councillor Trim, as well as a comment from the residents around shipping containers. So we have in this new bylaw added a new definition as well as some provisions around shipping containers, and that didn't exist in the old bylaws and it didn't exist in the first bylaw that was presented a couple months ago. And so what we've done is permit them only in a few zones, and they have not been permitted as of right as a use in any of the residential zones. And in the zones that they are permitted in, we've provided some provisions around how far they need to be set back from the road and the property lines, as well as some screening requirements. So those are new. I know because I went ahead of myself a little bit, but it's 3 and 4. These notes here are based on feedback that we received from the county staff, just to make sure that everything that we have here relates to the new provisions in the official plan. So clarifying accessory dwelling units, so having a second dwelling in the rural areas of our townships and allowing up to 3 in the more urban areas with servicing. So this is coming as a result of changes to the official plan and changes to the Planning Act, actually, where we're trying to allow a little bit more housing on lots that are already created. And we just wanted to make sure that, again, the language is a little bit more clear and that we are fully in line with the policies of the official plan. Similarly, with the water setback provisions in the official plan changed since the original zoning was in place. So there's a 30-meter water setback for structures, dwellings, and septics. However, we've added some greater flexibility for structures like sheds and smaller buildings so that they're allowed to be in the water setback. It's just making sure that the dwellings themselves are set back by that 30 meters. So those are some minor changes, again, to wording and to clarity. And then lastly, we did also make some changes to the administration and usage section of the bylaw, which is Chapter 1. It's not often used, but I think these are important to note. And these changes were made based on some concerns from our developers and landowners, as well as a comment that was received from Councillor Olmsted. So one of them, under transition provisions, section 1.21, this was to recognize planning applications that are sort of in the queue right now, whether it's a site plan or a plan of subdivision. If they've been applied for and we're sort of in the process of reviewing, it's already been deemed a complete application, we will recognize the zoning that is in place today. So the main thing would be, again, with the water setback. If someone has applied for a site plan application with a 20-meter setback, we won't require them to rezone that to a 30-meter setback, which would probably drastically change their proposal. So provided a complete application has been made by the time the bylaw is passed, we will recognize that existing zoning under the previous bylaw. Similarly, any property right now that has a minor variance and it hasn't been developed yet according to that minor variance, the new provision in here, it's under minor variances, sections 1.22. This will allow an extra year for that minor variance to be recognized, essentially, before it's no longer there, and they would need to apply for a new minor variance or a new zoning bylaw amendment to continue to have that relief. And then lastly, related to the comment from Councillor Olmsted last time, is that we've added to one of the provisions, it's called Clarity and Accuracy 1.14, just given that this was a giant undertaking, and as much as we've worked on it, there still might be some little things that we've missed. So just making it easier to make those clerical changes to the maps or the schedules or this text itself without going through the whole Planning Act process, public engagement, circulation thing. So just giving that flexibility for allow us to make those changes, particularly if it was something that we missed carrying the former bylaws into this one. So I'll also note that in addition to the informal comments we received from the county, we also sent our legal nonconforming provisions. We made a couple tweaks to those, and we sent them to our legal counsel for some review. So we're still waiting we did just receive their comments. We have not digested them yet, so we'll do that. We're also going to recirculate to the county for formal comments. And then again, we'll have the second public meeting at our next council meeting on the 18th. So once we digest all that, probably do another little review just to check things again. We will bring up a follow-up report with recommendations on how to proceed in November. And just one final note I'll make is that some of the comments we received were sort of out of scope of the zoning bylaw. So they may have related to site plan. They may have related to another bylaw that we don't have. And I just want to recognize those, and that we know that we're going to be receiving a new provincial policy statement from the province, so there's going to be some more policy changes probably coming in the next few months as well. So once that's in place, we're going to be reviewing some of those other planning related bylaws, again in the spirit of modernizing and making sure everything is up to date, and that we're doing what we can to support development in this community. And that concludes my presentation. So if there's any questions or initial reactions, let me know. Otherwise, certainly there'll be time to have a more fulsome discussion at the public meeting or a subsequent meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Planner Benzie. Councillor Trim, mover.
Yes, first of all, a comment. I'm sure everybody recognizes the amount of work that went into this, and I would like to thank our planner and the staff that helped her to bring forward this document. It's so good to see, and I know that it will make the work of other staff in planning and the building department so much easier, and that's great. And so that's my initial comment. I have one question, not a sneaky one, I don't hope not anyway. sea containers. I know they're going to be, should the bylaw be approved, prohibitive use in residential. We have them now in residential in some cases. I'm wondering if they will be grandfathered, or will there be a way of removing them over time? Has that been thought about? And maybe I should have brought this up sooner, but I'm only thinking about it now. Thank you.
Great point. Thanks, Councillor Trim. Planner Benzie, do you want to comment?
Yes, I don't have an immediate response to that. It's something I'll take away and maybe bug our legal with, or perhaps with the consultants as well. Just whether or not having an additional, having a sea can on your property, if that kind of falls under the legal non-conforming constraints. So if it's there now and it's legal now, with the new bylaw, if they're still able to do that. So I'm not sure, but it's certainly something we will look into, because I can foresee there being some confusions down the way with that. So I'll make a note of that and respond with the next report.
Perfect. Thank you. Councillor Bell, seconder. Do you have any comments or questions?
No, just mirroring Councillor Trim's comments. Just thanks for all your hard work on it. Seems to be going really well, addressing all the comments the last time, and I think looks all really good. So
Perfect. Any other questions from other members of council? Councillor Tabbert?
Mr. Mayor, to Planner Benzie. So following up on Councillor Trim's question, so if I want a sea can, now that he's mentioned it out in the open, we should get it onto our property now, sooner rather than later. So how do we prevent that from happening?
Thank you, Councillor Tabbert. I'm going to jump straight to the CAO on that one.
Yeah, so I think the grandfathering that Councillor Trim speaks about is for a legal structure that was installed prior to the adoption of the new bylaw. So legal meaning it has proper building permits, it has proper approval as of today. So we see a sea container on somebody's yard, just because it's a sea container, it does still require a permit if it's greater than 160 square feet. Yes, that's correct. So when residents call me and they say, I want to put a sea container on my property, well, I tell them that the process to have that is you need a permit. And you need to affix it to the ground somehow. And by the time you're done with this process, you might as well just have built a wood frame shed. So legal is important in this conversation. Does it exist legally today? Because that'll impact on how we enforce the bylaw in the future. So just recognizing what Alex said, I think that's the right approach, is to connect back with our team to find the true answers and come back to council at a later meeting with a true response. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. CAO's report just got a little bit bigger. Or sorry, not CAO's, planners, mixing everybody up. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I got two that I'll throw at you. The first one, just on your item on clarifying the floodplain provisions. Can you or any other member of the staff talk to changes after the zoning bylaw is implemented? And I know we're working with the county to look at remapping portions of the floodplain. How do those changes get back incorporated into a zoning bylaw? Do we have to go through the whole Planning Act process, or could it be modified similar to what we talked about in your paragraph 5?
I can take a stab at that. That's a great question. From what I understand of the mapping project, and maybe I will need to confirm this, was that it's going to give us a better understanding of where the floodplains are on the property, as opposed to changing the regulatory flood elevations themselves. However, that was the initial scope. There may have been an update to change the modeling to update the regulatory floodplain provisions themselves. If it's just the mapping, I would think that we would need to amend it in a bit more of in a formal way. That's probably something we would talk about with all the other townships as well, to determine what is the best approach. Some of the provisions in the floodplain too, so we didn't really change. We changed how we ordered the provisions, but we didn't we didn't, in a sense, change what was allowed and not allowed. And there is one in one area of the floodplain, in the Lac Calange area, there is an interesting kind of unique case there that is different from the other places. And I think it's worth exploring further. Why is that the case? And maybe those provisions actually do need to be updated. And for that, I'd like to maybe engage somebody who is an expert on dealing with properties in the floodplain, to give us advice on how we should update those provisions again. And I think that would require a new public process with a new map. So once that mapping is done, I think it would be appropriate to revisit the floodplain provisions and just make sure that we are staying up to date in terms of the policy requirements by the province, the best practices in terms of mitigating issues there, as well as keeping the legal nonconforming issues there as well. So I guess in short, I would say once we have that data, I think reviewing them through a public amendment process would be the way to go.
Public Works Manager would like to chime in.
Yes, I'd like to add, sorry. Sorry, and part of the zoning bylaw that has a certain elevation above sea level, which is still in the bylaw. And the mapping that we have currently, it's just a guide, show where the line is. Part of the county's project that we're partnered in is phase one of this project is to identify shortfalls and also provide new contour mapping, which would help residents determine if their property is greater than the elevation that's in the bylaw.
Perfect, thank you. My second question has to do with your item number 5, and I'll just make the comment that I think having a transition plan is perfect. I'm glad to see that's amended for both that and existing minor variances. With respect to the clarity and accuracy, how do we scope that? And do we need to have formal delegations to the planner, to the CAO, to accept those amendments without having to go through the Planning Act process? How do we actually administer that implementation?
Yeah, I can try taking that too, and it's a good with every planning thing. It's always figuring out the scope of it's always context specific. So I think in this case it would be up to the planner to determine what is minor and what needs to go through a more major fulsome process. The intent of this is to allow for changes that were missed from the reconciliation of these documents. And I think that would be clear enough. If you are advising that maybe it's not clear, then perhaps that's something we can take away to the consultant and say, we need to be a little bit more clear. So I'd look to you and your feedback on if this isn't providing enough clarity here, then we can take that feedback back. But the intent is to make it the discretion, I believe, of the planner to allow for these minor changes, as it's noted there: typographical, grammatical, spelling, section numbering, transposition errors, minor mapping irregularities. So to me, a minor mapping irregularity would be, someone would come to us and say, oh, I had this rezoning in 2008 and it's not here. Why is that? To me, that's considered a minor mapping irregularity that we could change. If there was no documentation, and then maybe that would be something to have a more fulsome review of. But that is the intent of that policy, and if that intent, if council doesn't feel like that's what we're meeting with that language, then I think that's certainly something we can take back to the consultant and say we need to have more clarity on what is how does they word it? Corrections to technical errors, if we need to clarify better what a technical error might be.
Perfect. And I'm not going to wade into it, but from my perspective, I don't want a resident to have to pay to amend it and then go through the public notice and the appeal period to make a change of what it used to be before. But I also want to make sure that, you know, if we don't address this zoning bylaw for 10 more years, it's very clear for those 10 years where those authorities lie, and a change of personality doesn't influence that. So as long as you know, staff can look at that, make the recommendation, but I'm fine to keep it whatever way you recommend, that it can last beyond personalities, and it's clear that the residents aren't at a deficiency because of a technical error.
Yeah, that's good feedback, and I'll bring that back to EcoView as well, just to get their feedback on this. I believe this was taken from other zoning bylaws, and to just understand what their thoughts are on the use of this, and if there's ever been a challenge in interpretation. That's certainly something I can take back to EcoView, and they're going to be at the next meeting, so I can ask them to speak to that particularly.
Perfect. Good. Thank you. Those are my two questions. Is there anything else from council? None. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Carried. Good. 9.4, budget direction. So the recommendation is the Council of Township Whitewater Region approve the approach and timetable for the 2024 budget. Moving to seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Bell, seconded by Councillor Moore. And this is going over to our treasurer.
Thank you. So just a bit of background. It's Section 290 of the Municipal Act that allows municipality to, or requires municipality to pass a budget every year based on the amount of money needed to perform its operations and carry out its business. Section 391 of the Municipal Act allows municipality to impose user fees and charges. The trending practice for this municipality has been to pass the budget in Q4, which is what we're coming into. So that's what we're into now. The only exception would be the budget that passed earlier in 2023. Due to the fact we had the election, it was held off until the spring to pass that one. Just for information purposes, last year's total levy was $6.7 million. So a 1% increase on that is $67,729. When we went through the actual budget for this year, or for 2024, sorry, there's a few impact pieces that are the direct impacts on it. Consumer price index is one of them. Right now, if you do an average of the 12-month CPI from June to June, it comes out to be 5.43%. So that affects everything that it gets purchased. It's the overall piece for Ontario for the growth and for the actual purchase of goods. The other side is the federal and provincial funding. At this point in time, I don't have any of the grants confirmed. That normally comes late November. So right now, the way that we're budgeting is based on 2023's numbers that has been received. So UMF is a one that is a levy stabilization fund, not required just to go to capital, but it can be put into any operational activity. OSIF is our community infrastructure fund. It's designed for capital. Just as a point of note, the 2023 allotment was $561,000. The 2022 was $488,000. So there's a 15% increase between those years. I'm expecting a very similar increase this year. Ontario, and then the Canada Community Building Fund, which is formerly the gas tax. The 2023 allotment was $231. 2022 is $222. So I'm expecting a very similar amount again for this year. Whenever we did our asset management plan in 2022, they noted the gap in what we were actually funding towards capital to what we were actually had for capital, what we needed. They put a gap of $11.7 million because we normally were putting about $1 million towards capital. So they recommended a average increase for capital only of 4.2% for tax-funded assets, 7.1% for funded water assets, and 2.9% for funded sanitary assets, our water system. Currently, the township commits 1% of the previous year's levy towards capital reinvestment reserve, which is used for capital projects in the next year. So for 2024, this would entail an additional contribution of $67,729 for a total contribution of towards that reserve of $404,000. And then, so total for capital with that reserve in, out of the operating side, would be $1.198 million. The other piece to note is the increases that the Ontario government has done, Ontario and federal government has done for CPP and EI for payroll deductions. They increase approximately about $7,800 for the year. In insurance, I mean, I haven't got a finalized quote from their insurer at this point, but they're expecting around a 5% increase for the year. So at this point, staff is looking at a 5.2% total levy increase. So it's plus or minus of 1% for operating, which includes a 2.5% council and staff cost of living adjustment, which is 46% of the Ontario total 12-month average for June of CPI, and plus or minus 4.2% for general capital levy increase, which was set out in our asset management plan. At this point, I'm also looking at 10% water rate increase, but that is per our water rate study, and which is to be reviewed, and then 4% for sanitary sewer, again per that wastewater study, but again to be reviewed. Those numbers are fluctuating at this point due to the actual review of those amounts. And then you can see below my tentative schedule for the actual bringing everything forward. I'd like to bring forward October 25th presentation of the entire budget process, November 1st discussion, November 15th would be our public meeting, and then by December 6th, I'd like to be able to pass budget for the year. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Treasurer. I'll start with my mover. Councillor Bell, is there any comments or questions you have?
So one of the things that's come up a number of times is the water rate increase and the sanitary rate increase. So obviously we heard from the group from the Cobden area about the increases that they seen last year. Obviously, if we're looking at, and I understand it's based on that wastewater rate study, but if they're going to get another 10% increase on their water as well as a 4% on their sanitary rate increase, those feelings aren't going to change and they're probably going to get worse. Is there anything that we're looking into currently to try to offset some of these increases? I know the increases are what they are because of the study, and that the township's hands are tied because of the way that water has to be paid for by the consumer as well as the sanitary. But is there anything that we're looking into to offset some of these pretty significant increases year over year for these residents?
So at this point in time, we're always looking for grants. It's the biggest impact that can impact the actual rates is if we can receive grants to fund certain aspects. The issue that comes is the actual aging of the infrastructure to actually do that, because that 10% is not just an operating thing, that's capital too. And for the number of users, that increase is what's required in order to make up and keep that maintenance going so that the system doesn't fail. That's where, whenever they ran with their numbers, they did growth-based, and they also did based on age and those aspects. That's why I have to put it as to be reviewed, because this first budget I'm going through, so I want to go very detailed into why it is. We're also going to be bringing forward a report on why the costs are the way they are to council, I believe later this month. And so that report will identify to the public and to council where the costs have come from and more substantiate the rates that we're charging.
Yeah, maybe.
CAO, please.
Yeah, just to add to that, to what Treasurer McGonigal is saying is the rate study was adopted in 2021, and it recommended a rate for every year for 10 years. We didn't quite hit the threshold we were supposed to hit, say 2022. So now we're kind of trying to recover those funds as we progress forward. So we do have a spreadsheet that we'll share with council in the more fulsome budget deliberation, which is scheduled for late October, after the report from our manager of public works. But we'll be able to play with those numbers. I say work with those numbers to better understand how it impacts future years. Because, I mean, truly the decision on wastewater rates should be looked at over a number of years and not just 1 year. So perhaps during that deliberation, we could talk about maybe what it would look like next year, or 2025 or 2026 for the term of council, so you guys can better appreciate, and the public could better appreciate what we're trying to do to try to, leverage some funds now and or later. So just an item to add to the point. Thanks.
Perfect. And I'll just throw a comment if Councillor Bell wants to add something afterwards. For both of these, I think we have to be, council has to be very, very sensitive to the situation we're in and where we have the ability to decrease the impact on the taxpayer. And when we're talking about water and sanitary, you need to have a long-term view. And what I don't want to do, and I would encourage staff not to present us options that just defer the cost forward. We don't want to put it in a situation where 10 years from now, it's not a 4% increase, it's a 12. So that would be one way I would like to encourage staff to approach it. I'd rather knowingly set a rate that we need, and that's it. The other thing is that I know that those rate studies, and I'm glad to see they're both going to be reviewed. There are projects mentioned in the water rate study that may no longer be necessary in the next 10 years. If we defer that project because it's no longer necessary, can we reduce the rate? So those are the questions we need to be throwing at staff. Again, not deferring the problem forward, but if there is no legitimate need for a new piece of equipment, can we defer that to when the need is, and therefore raise the funds at the appropriate time for that? That's what I would encourage staff to approach that. Councillor Bell, is there anything you want to add?
I guess it's maybe more of a general comment, not specific to this, but we're looking at, you're looking for direction on a 5.2% total levy increase, so that's operating and capital, that's correct. So that's one thing, just looking, I know last year we were kind of in that 9% range, and the cost of living, it's affecting the township, but it's also affecting every resident of Whitewater as well. Whenever it comes to their groceries, comes to their gas bill, everybody's putting more money through their cars into their grocery bills based on that CPI, and they're going to look at a 5% levy increase as just another cost associated with living, right? One thing that, and it's not necessarily, it's not spoken to in this report, but one thing that I'd like to see is just at least some consideration in where we can create efficiencies. And I know you're always looking for that, but if we can have that spoken to into the reports that come into whenever we're looking further into October, I think that's something that the residents like to see. It's what I hear. It's where can we create efficiencies so that we're not 5%, 10% year over year. So that's just more of a general comment, that if we can consider that through these deliberations, just always looking for where we can create efficiencies so that we can keep that levy, that increase, as minimal as possible. That's what I'd like to see. So.
Treasurer, please.
I fully understand the efficiencies piece. I just want to clarify for everybody watching that the levy increase is not directly, that number does not directly increase your taxes. Taxation is based on assessment changes over the year. So the overall amount, whenever you see that 5.2%, that's not what your tax bill is going to go up. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And whenever I bring forward the piece in October, I will, like later in October, I'll be bringing forward the other side to show what the impact would be to your actual taxes for the municipal side. It's surprising how different it is than the actual levy. The levy itself is just the actual money the township needs to operate, but the actual impact is very different for the residential tax rate.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
CAO?
Yeah, if I could just, to get direction from council, so we speak efficiencies, I think certainly, yes, we'll look at it line by line and see if we could reduce $2,000 to $1,500. Certainly we could do that. But, I think the operating budget is pretty tight, if I could use that term to say that it's not robust. So efficiencies in most cases relate to changes of levels of service. So if we're thinking we want to save operating cost, we are changing the level of service. And I want to make that clear. So if council wishes for us to provide some options to them, we could do that, which will have a more significant impact on the budget. The 1% could turn into 0, but we have to find that, it's not $10,000, it's like $60,000 to $70,000 to $80,000. So certainly we're prepared to do that, but we need to recognize that it's a change in level of service to our residents. So just as a quick note, thanks.
Perfect. Councillor Bell, anything else?
No, just to touch on that too. I think I definitely like to see that as we go through those deliberations, whether you as a staff think there are ways that we can modify levels of service where, again, speaking to those efficiencies, where maybe something that we've been doing for the last 10 or 15 years maybe isn't necessarily necessary now, and maybe that money can be directed into other avenues that are maybe where those funds are better suited. I think, if we do this every year, and if we're not looking at those types of options, then I think we're not necessarily doing our job here. So I think we have a really competent staff, and if there's something that you think that can be dollars that can be directed in other directions, or if there's spots that you see that are lacking and we can take from one area and give it to another, I think that's something that I'd like to see. And the other one last point, I've talked enough, but I know we spoke to it whenever we did the deliberations last year, but that, where is it? I'm just looking for it in the report. As far as the capital is concerned, there's the $11.7 million gap. As far as the annual infrastructure gap, we have that 11.7, that $1 million gap. We are, just so that it's clear in my mind, we're looking to increase what we're putting into reserves to kind of make up for that capital gap this year, and we're tending to look towards doing that year over year so that we close that gap as time goes on. That's correct?
So it's an add-in of funds in order to both either go into reserves or actually purchase capital assets at the time to perform that project, that process of refurbishing assets or renewing assets, I should say. So we put in last year's budget, there was $298,000 put into that. That was the 4.8% last year. So this year would be at 4.2% on whatever on that last levy in order to come into this year. So it would be an additional, say, $280,000.
And I guess just speaking to those possible efficiencies, or seeing if we can get some dollars, like even if that money is directed into those capital reserves, so that whenever we have a project that comes up like the Cobden sanitation, so that we're not increasing, maybe that's a bad example because of water and sanitary rates, like I understand that, but if that can fund future projects so we don't have to increase levies by an extra % or 2 down the road, those are options that I'd like to see.
That comes to another side. We're looking towards the capital plan, the 10-year capital plan, and the multi-year budget. Both lead into, when you do those types of processes, it allows us to better plan for the future, which once I get through this one, that's my next step, is to create that future forecasting. It better plans how the funds of the municipality will go and better shapes the flow of the actual increases every year.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Bell. And I just want to, just because we don't lose anybody who might be watching it, I just want to go back to the question you had asked about the $11.7 million. Staff, correct me if I'm wrong, but that asset management plan called for us to put $11 million a year into reserves. Each year we are putting, what did we call it? An additional 280,000 this year?
Yep.
So we are literally, there's no way for us to maintain the assets we have. There is, if you crunch the numbers, we cannot maintain the assets we have. We are pushing that discussion on, and it's something I've been talking to the staff. We have to tackle that problem because we can't afford $11.7 million a year into assets. So just be cognizant. There is a huge elephant sitting in this corner of this room, and we're nibbling on the ear. Okay? Yep. So, good. I'll stop. I'll open the floor back up to everybody else, and I will comment at the end. Is there, my seconder was Councillor Moore.
Just one comment when it comes to water and wastewater. We had discussed attending Roma in January and that being on our agenda. Hopefully we can bring that to the forefront while we're there. So we can't really say yes or no, but hopefully we can apply for delegation and hopefully we get one.
Thanks, Councillor Moore. And I'll just emphasize for those people that might be watching, yes, the issue with wastewater and water rates here in Cobden is being dealt with as a separate item. There's lots of work being done by the staff to come back and provide us a wholesome report on that. We have engaged with Roma and AMO. It's actually on their agenda next month to discuss in order to prepare for the Roma conference in January. So we are making headways there. That will continue at the same time as we work through the budget. Good. Any other questions or comments?
Just a comment on that. Yeah. We can't be the only municipality having this problem, so I'm sure it's to find our brother or sister out there who's having the same problem and sort of jump on their bandwagon, hopefully.
Yes, we have found others that are going to, that we are going to be recruiting so that we have a one loud voice at Roma.
Safety in numbers.
Yes, good. I think I saw Councillor Trim's hand up.
Yes, and just further to what Councillor Moore said, would it be appropriate to really engage and keep our local MPP, Mr. Yakubuski, in the loop with this so that he has a very, very deep understanding of the very serious issue we have here? And maybe he can help advocate for us when we present to the minister at the Roma conference. That's one thing. And the second is a question to you, Mr. Mayor. You invited councillors to have input into the budget process, and I'm just wondering what would be the appropriate way for me, for instance, to have some input. Would I speak with a department head, or how would be the most appropriate and most efficient way for me to do that? Thank you.
I'll speak to the first one. Yes, we have engaged Mr. Yakubuski, and in fact, I was just talking to his staff this morning about wastewater and water rates. So, and we will be encouraging him to attend any delegations we do. So, thank you for reiterating that point. Good. Engagement of the staff. CAO, do you want to comment to that?
Yeah, I would just say that we're proposing to host sort of a daytime budget discussion with council, open to the public, that would review the fulsomeness of the proposed 2024 budget. I'd say at that time would be an opportunity to voice an item to all of members of council. So after that session, the treasurer and I would sort of open the floor up to the members of council and what department you lead in, and others if you wish, to connect with the staff to better understand the reasoning for their operating and capital budget proposals. So subsequent to the 25th, I think it's really scheduled the 24th because I think the mayor's unavailable on the 25th, but the 24th, there'd be about a 2-week gap where you could connect individually with staff to better understand specific areas of the budget. So for example, Councillor Moore is lead in Public Works, then he could engage Mr. Cleroux with respect to that specific budget. So there'll be, wait till we present the fulsome budget. After that, then we would allow some, we always allow them, but we would open the floor to the members of council to engage with the department heads. Thanks.
No, thank you for the question. It's good for process because we don't want to, the staff are going to be working very hard to try to put it all together as one package. So maybe now is just an appropriate time to make a proposal to some of those dates that are listed on the slide in front of you there. And CEO, you have the notes from our previous discussion, so I just want to make sure I don't miss. We're proposing that it's not October 25th, but it's October 24th. I just want to make sure that from Councillor Bell's schedule, that's if that's a conflict. The next item, it says the November 1st would be a deliberation by council. That's been postponed until
The 15th.
November 15th.
So we would have so the November 1st meeting would be like the individual department consults with the council members. 15th would be the update. The November 28th or 30th, which would be a special meeting for the public meeting for the budget. And then December adoption. So whether that could be done on the 6th or another special meeting, we would determine that at that time. So I'll have the treasurer circulate those dates to the members of council, and maybe just looking over to Councillor Bell for the 24th of October. I mean, certainly we could discuss offline as well.
Yeah, the 24th is a conflict for myself. Yeah, I'll be away that day just working. So any other day that week works, but.
So we'll work through it. We'll figure out some day timelines and send them to council. Thanks.
Perfect. So council has, those dates are written on a whiteboard right now. So before you leave today, please engage with staff, especially to firm up the first one, so we can all make plans for that last week of October of when we could meet to receive that departmental budget. Good. Thank you. Councillor Trim, you just required all that discussion. It's perfect. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I am just adding on to Councillor Bell's. I do agree that we do have to somehow start to find some efficiencies. I don't know where that's going to come from, but I think it's time we do. And I think moving forward, there's going to soon have to be some tough decisions made. We are sitting with 3 libraries. We are sitting with 3 arenas, well, down to 2 arenas. We are sitting with 5 fire halls. Someday we're going to have these tough discussions because I don't know how we can sustain year after year all of these assets that we have, and they're all deteriorating. So I think somewhere down the line that's going to be a tough discussion for sure. I think that's all I have right now. I just wanted to be sure that staff is definitely looking at some efficiencies moving forward towards this budget, because I agree. We're in a situation right now where families are just trying to feed their families, and it's tough out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other comments before I jump into it? Good. I will just highlight one other one. We talked about CPI and efficiencies. So again, just for the sake of it, we're talking about the 12-month average the treasurer outlined at 5.43. So the cost of, basically the average cost of everything went up by 5.43. Everything, including the fuel we use, the paper we use, the contracts that we have, and yet we're only proposing a 1% operating levy increase. So when you subtract 1 from 5.43, we're short 4.43. That they found efficiencies to do that in their recommendation. They've already, but those, I would say, those aren't the level of service efficiencies. Those are cutting this or deciding not to do this or no flowers on the main street, whatever those small things that can make up that efficiency. So I just want to make sure that we're clear in terms of when we say efficiencies, we're thinking about shaving the ice cube, right? But really what we need to be talking about is what level of service changes, and does that have a dramatic increase, not just in our operating, but in our capital, right? And when the presentation came forth in June to not operate 2 arenas, that was a level of service change proposed by staff that directly impacted our operating, how much we spent on recreation, and our future liability for repairing those buildings. We didn't accept that at that point in time. Those are that's going to keep coming back to us, like the Deputy Mayor just said, for us to make those hard decisions. Otherwise, there's no way we can get around continually increasing to find $11 million a year. So that's my point. The one thing I would like staff to take a look at when they do come back from the departmental budgets is the 2.5% of cost of living adjustment. If we can adjust that a little bit higher, only because we're just putting it off to pay it at some future point. I acknowledge we may not be able to reach the full 100% of CPI, but if we can shave off a little bit more, again, I don't want to defer something into the future and have the next year's pay for us trying to cut a cost this year. Good. Is there any other questions or comments from council? So just to be clear, to review the process again, this is the direction. They go away now in the next 3 weeks, and they work on based of all the fear-mongering we just gave them. They come back with departmental proposals, right, which is the treasurer trying to contain the manager of public works. Okay, we know that's what he's going to be doing. Okay, 1 less road, 2 less kilometers. So that will get presented to us on the 25th. We're receiving it. We're not approving it. Then you will have a number, like almost 3 weeks before it comes back for us to deliberate on it. In those 3 weeks, staff will confirm there will be a time where you'll be able to engage directly with department heads on some of those details, plus amongst yourselves as leads. Okay? And then on the 15th, we'll confirm that so that it can then be subsequently presented to the public for their input. Okay, so it allows you a good solid 6 weeks for this to be out in the public before they have to, they come to the table with their comments. Fair summary? Did I got that on the nose there, CAO?
That's right.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect. Okay, if there's no other comments, good. We will call for a vote. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Good. Next item, 9.5. The recommendation is that the Council, Township Whitewater Region, approve amendments to the organizational structure policy. And a mover and a seconder. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Trim. Am I going, CAO?
Yeah, thanks so much. So the present report before council is to make amendments to the organizational structure policy. So this is the policy that provides our fulsome organizational structure, including all the full-time and part-time and casual employees. So this was last updated back in June 2022 during when my predecessor, Mr. Tremblay, was here. That was the last amendment to it. So the amendments that were made then were mostly with respect to the manager of Parks and Recreation who was departing. So Mr. DeRoche left back in the spring of 2022. And then as a result of an unsuccessful recruitment, that position was not backfilled. And the council had decided to reposition Parks and Recreation under Community Development, which is the department that I used to lead as the manager. So at that time, I was sort of managing both the Parks and Rec and community development. Further to that, there were other modifications. So the clerk, CEMC, and the HR compensation coordinator moved from the office of the CAO to the finance and administration. So effective July last year, I had become the new CAO, and we tried to recruit for that all-encompassing, if you will, position, which is Parks and Rec community development, so planning, building, economic development, and we were unsuccessful in recruiting that position. Cognizant that we were moving into election times, I recommended to staff that or to council rather, that we stand still for the time being until I could further analyze our situation. So during the last number of months, 9 or 12 months, I served as the CAO, but also as the manager of community development and Parks and Rec, all under one umbrella. Over the last number of months, I've been reviewing the service delivery pressure points, and I've recognized that there's a significant gap in leadership around Parks and Recreation and community services. So what I've realized as a result of becoming the CAO is that I'm the point of contact for many, many, many organizations, extending from the libraries to the museums, to the rec associations, to the agricultural societies, to user groups, to the other like RCATV and the like. So, as well as the Whitewater Region seniors. So, my proposal before council with respect to the changes to the organizational structure is to reintroduce the position of manager of community services. So that would replace the manager of community development, but would be specific to areas of Parks and Rec, both operations and capital, and then they would also liaise with community partners and agencies. So, as a result of the fulsome discussion we had on the arena operations, which is only one sphere of recreation we could provide or we do provide, I've come to realize that there are a lot of clarities that need to be developed amongst this sphere of service. I think the person that gets hired here will be one with the community. It doesn't necessarily need to be somebody who understands how a plant room in an arena works, but it has to be somebody who could engage with our users, engage with our associations, and try to find some ways that we could all work together and achieve some difference for our community in the recreation world, extending from seniors to libraries and culture to recreation. So that is one of the major changes to the organizational structure. The other one would reposition the clerk CMC under the office of the CAO, so it's more fitting that the clerk be within the office of the CAO as they support myself and council. So the change that is being proposed here would maintain staffing levels at 32 full-time and 7 part-time, so no changes in the total number of full-time staff. Financial implications are essentially a net zero. We are replacing one of the Park Arena Operator 3, so that's a full-time permanent Park Operator 3 position. And we're also looking to reduce the number of students, in particular the swim program we've put forward in past years. So we've been quite successful in the summer with the City of Pembroke. I received the invoice just recently. There must have been about 60 names on that list of residents of Whitewater Region who attended the Pembroke pool and were subsidized by the township. So the non-resident rate was covered by the township. So at a cost of about $2,300. So not a huge amount of money, but I think it's a better service than having the students that we can't fill positions for. So that's the summary of the proposal. Next steps was mistakenly copy pasted from the paragraph above, but next steps would be to modify some job descriptions and as well as post the position for the manager in the coming weeks. Thanks so much.
Thank you, CAO. And I'll open it up for questions. We'll start with the mover, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I think CAO Burton has pretty much outlined everything there. I do just want to thank him because, as he just mentioned, what he has done in the last year and the number of hats that he's had to wear, it's certainly, we do have to appreciate everything that you've done, so thank you very much for that. And I am looking forward to getting this new position filled and hopefully then giving you that opportunity, CAO, to finally be able to get in that position and really get down into the weeds, because it's just been, you just have not been able to at this point in time because of that. So thank you again.
Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And next, my seconder was Councillor Trim.
Yes, just very brief comment. I believe this is going to be very workable. It's going to make the operation smoother, and I'm looking forward to the new position, and yeah, it's, as far as I'm concerned, very positive.
Thank you. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll just echo both Deputy Mayor and Councillor Trim, the work that has been done that got you to the point now where you can define exactly the best way forward. I think that's been very valuable, and it came at a cost to you, but we appreciate that. So thank you, CAO. And like was said, I look forward to how we can improve community services through that dedicated position. And I think what we've learned going through the whole analysis of ICE operations is just how important it is to engage and to have ongoing relationships with these organizations in our community. And I'm hopeful that this position will give us that dedicated access so that we can help shape that aspect of the community services. Good. One question. Councillor Moore.
Just noticed here, under community services, we have manager, then we have Parks and Rec assistant operator, and then under that we have superintendent of Parks and Rec. Should they not be reversed?
So the Parks and Rec assistant would support both the manager and the superintendent. We could certainly edit it to push it down one space.
Because to me, an assistant is not a superintendent. The superintendent should be over the assistant, no?
Yeah, so the little thing out is showing an assistant to the department,
Yep.
but either, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, good. And we'll just get that clarified in the terms of reference once they get adjusted. That's perfect. Anything else? Excellent. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And it's carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is notice of motion. And I'll just go through the council members in attendance and confirm if there's any notices of motion. Seeing none. Move on. Number 11, correspondence. There are 3 information items here on correspondence, and we're going to just attack each one individually. The first one is a petition to the Minister of Public Safety of Canada regarding flooding along Ottawa River. As you can see in the resolution that was provided from Clarence, Rockland, they are seeking us to become an advocate with them to seek more investigation into the flooding along the Ottawa River. Good. Is there any comments from the floor on this? I'm going to start with Councillor Tabbert, as she is lead for this area. So Councillor Tabbert.
Mayor, I think that we need to, I think there should be more than just information. I think we need to have one of our staff look into this and bring back the resolution or pass it if they see fit as it is. Flooding is a big concern in our area, and we need all the help we can get in cutting our costs there and seeing what we can do for water management along the Ottawa River.
Thank you, Councillor Tabbert. We'll see if there's any other discussion. Councillor Moore.
Yeah, I did get an email earlier this week about a person's concern about the height of the river. So I did mark down the numbers for that day, and I have since gone back. And we are now at February levels where they're actually draining the reservoirs up north. So with it being so dry down here, I'm not sure if there has been a lot of rain up north that we just didn't pay attention to, or what's happening. They can't be emptying the reservoirs now. Normally they do that January, February. So I don't know why we're keeping our levels where we are, where they shouldn't be at this time of year.
And just to clarify, you're hoping that this petition supporting this resolution would help get some answers to that?
It keeps us in the forefront, and they remember we're here. So yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Good, thank you. Is there any other comments from members of council on this item? None? So, sorry, CAO?
Yeah, no, go ahead, sir.
No, I'll just say, from what Councillor Tabbert has said, can we ask staff to come back with a potential resolution that we could discuss and vote on at the next council meeting?
We could, yeah. So just to the clerk, if you will, how would we just draft a resolution for consideration? Is that how we proceed with requiring direction, perhaps, or something?
Yeah, we probably could have did it as a notice of motion. Is my mic on? Yeah. But we can just bring this forward to the next meeting.
Noted. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you. Next item here is request to the province for regulations on short-term accommodations digital platforms. So keeping with our theme of earlier today, we have Town of Port Perry has shared a resolution that they've carried in their community, and just given that that was an agenda item today, I'm just looking for any comments from members of council. Councillor Tabbert.
I'm wondering if we couldn't put this in with what we're working on now. Could we have like a similar resolution to get the province to help with their regulations instead of just each municipality doing their own? Is there any way we can do that, Clerk, through Mr. Mayor?
Clerk, could we do the same as the last time and bring another resolution forward?
Yeah, well, I can put it, yeah, it will do.
Perfect. Good. So we'll hold on that. We'll just see if there's any other discussion. Is there any other discussion around the table on this item? Or a general consensus on Councillor Tabbert's approach? Good. All right. So direction to staff. Thank you. The next item. These are all Councillor Tabbert lead ones. She's a busy day today. Protective Services. Enclosed is the 2024 OPP annual billing statement. If there's any questions, the treasurer can speak to the numbers. If there's any member of council has a question on the numbers. And just highlight that it's non-negotiable. It's a $1 million bill that we get every year that we pay. And that's how it works. It's good. Is there any comments from members of council? Councillor Tabbert, do you want to add anything as the lead for Protective Services?
I just want to say that I haven't had a chance to go over the numbers yet. They provided a very detailed report, but unfortunately, it came at a time when I don't have internet because I'm moving. So I do want to go over the numbers and then meet with our 2 liaison officers at each of the detachments and see if there's a way we can reduce some of the numbers. Because I know some have gone up, some have gone down. So I'll do that and see what we can do there. But like the Mayor said, it's, you know, they give us the bill and we pay it.
Good. Any other comments? Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Tabbert. We'll move on to item number 12, which is announcements. And Deputy Mayor, you get to go first.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Just one announcement, and that being that we have hired 2 driver operators, and they have both filled the positions. We have Braden Mayotte and Grayson Spence. Braden will be joining us on October 16th and Grayson on October the 10th, and they will be filling those driver operator positions. So if you see them out and about, give them a warm welcome, and that's everything. Thank you.
Congratulations. Councillor Bell.
No, there's no announcements for me at this time.
Yeah. Councillor Tabbert.
I have a few announcements regarding our public library. Although a lot of people may not go to the library, we are very active right now. This month is Library Month, and they have a bingo going. Go to one of the libraries and pick up a bingo card and fill it out and see what you can do to do your better things. We also have a calendar coming out that we're looking for your events, birthdays, anniversaries, special celebrations, community events, and they're looking for artwork, which could be a painting, a drawing, or photos. And you can also advertise your business in this calendar. The deadline is October 10th for submitting anything, so we're hoping we can get a bunch more. And we also have an online book club that is starting this Thursday at 7 p.m. And it will be online. If you don't have the Facebook, you can contact your branch or any of the branches and find out more about an online book club. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor Tabbert. Councillor Moore.
In September, I had 2 meetings at the airport. One was a regular meeting and one was a special meeting to hear what the presentation was that went to County Council. And that has, I don't know if there'll be anything forthcoming in that or not. We'll wait and see. And a big thank you to anyone who helped out with Beachbrook Public School 100th anniversary. We celebrated that on September 16th, and the mayor brought to us gracious words, so thank you for that. And it was a great turnout. I don't have the final numbers yet, but it'll be interesting to know how many people attended. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Trim.
Yes, I would be remiss if I didn't remind the public of the Taste of the Valley, which is going to be October 14th. And I know that Planner Benzie and others, staff, have been working very hard on behalf of the township for this event. And so I hopefully, Mr. Mayor, you would, or through you to our CAO, make sure that we are very grateful for their work. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for Taste of the Valley. One of the largest, I think it is the largest one in Renfrew County. So very, very happy to be able to hosting that again. Good. And I have no additional announcements. Yes. Yeah. Item number 13 is bylaws. And the resolution before us is that the bylaws listed on the October 4th, 2023 agenda be taken as read and passed. Can I get a mover, please, and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Trim, seconded by Councillor Tabbert. Is there any questions or comments? Sorry. Yeah, is there any questions or comments? I'll go to the mover first. Councillor Trim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a brief comment about the first bylaw. This bylaw is a bylaw to appoint new members to the Whitewater Region Seniors Home Support and Active Living Working Group. And so there we have the 5 new members appointed. Some of them aren't new volunteers, but just so that the public knows that these are people who are volunteering to work for seniors in our community, and that's the whole Whitewater region. And so their names are there listed to be recognized, and if you happen to meet these people, I think it's worthwhile to engage and ask and talk about what activities and services, I should say, they are providing, helping to provide for the seniors in our community. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for being able to comment about that.
Perfect. Councillor Tabbert, anything?
Nothing.
Good. Any other members of council? Good. We'll call for a vote. All those in favor? And it's carried. So again, thank you for those volunteers. I appreciate you bringing that up, Councillor Trim, and making sure that's highlighted. Excellent. Clerk, just to confirm, there's no closed session for today?
Correct.
Excellent. And I am not sure if we have had a council meeting that has only gone 2 hours and 5 minutes before.
Wow.
With 3 very, very significant items on them. Yes, that's so true. So with that, I have to call for a vote to adjourn? Okay, so we are adjourned at 3:06 p.m. Thank you.